My wife kept sneaking out at night, so I installed a hidden camera. That day after dropping Noah off at school, I didn't go straight home. I drove around for nearly an hour with no real destination, just letting the radio play quietly while my thoughts spiraled. Every memory from the past year felt suspect now. Every late-night argument that ended without resolution. Every time Emily seemed distant, but insisted she was just tired. I wonder how long this had really been going on and whether I'd only just started paying attention because part of me was finally ready to see it. When I did return home, Emily was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, staring at the screen without typing. She looked up when I walked in, startled, like she hadn't heard the door. Her smile appeared a second too late. "You forgot something?" she asked. "No," I said. "Just thought I'd work from home today." She nodded, but I could tell it unsettled her. That mattered. For years, my presence at home during the day had been normal. Now it felt intrusive to her, like I was stepping into a space she claimed as private. I spent the day pretending to work, answering emails, joining meetings on mute, while watching her through the reflection in the microwave door or listening to her footsteps move from room to room. She avoided Noah's hallway entirely. She avoided me too. By the afternoon, the tension between us was so thick it felt like static in the air. That night, I lay in bed next to her, awake long after her breathing evened out. I kept replaying the footage in my head. The way she hesitated outside Noah's room. The fact that she didn't go straight outside afterward, like she was weighing a decision. I tried to imagine innocent explanations. Checking on him because she was worried. Going for a walk to clear her head. But innocent explanations don't require secrecy. They don't require lies. Around 1 a.m, I felt her shift beside me. My muscles tensed instinctively, but I kept my breathing slow and steady. She waited. I could feel it, the pause where she listened to make sure I was asleep. Then she slid out of bed. I didn't move. I let the camera do the watching for me. My phone buzzed again. Motion detected. I stared at the screen, my chest tight. This time, she didn't go to Noah's room. She walked straight past it and headed downstairs. Minutes later, another alert. Front door opened. She was gone. I lay there until dawn, staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of marriage turns into silent surveillance, and whether we'd crossed a point of no return long before I ever noticed. In the morning, she looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes. Hands trembling slightly as she poured coffee. She didn't ask how I slept. I didn't ask where she'd gone. We spoke only about practical things. Bills. Noah's homework. Groceries. It felt like we were actors playing the roles of family we no longer were. Over the next few days, the pattern became unmistakable. She left the house at least 3 nights a week. On 2 of those nights, she stopped by Noah's room first. Always briefly, always silently. He never woke up. Or, if he did, the camera didn't show it. I started sleeping in short bursts, my body permanently on edge. Every buzz on my phone made my stomach drop. I became jumpy, distracted at work, distant with friends. One coworker asked if everything was okay at home. I lied without thinking. The worst part wasn't the fear of what she was doing. It was the fear of what I was becoming. I hated the secrecy. I hated the suspicion. I hated that I'd turned into someone who watched his own wife through a screen instead of talking to her like a human being. But every time I considered confronting her, I remembered the ease with which she lied to my face, and I stopped myself. One evening, while Emily was out grocery shopping, I went into Noah's room and sat on the edge of his bed. I watched him play a game on his tablet, completely absorbed, laughing softly to himself. I studied his face, looking for signs I couldn't define. Fear, confusion, anything. I found nothing. He looked like a normal kid, safe in his own little world. "Dad," he said, glancing up, "why are you looking at me like that?" I forced a smile, just thinking about how fast you're growing up. He rolled his eyes and went back to his game. Kids have a way of grounding you like that, pulling you back from the edge of your own thoughts. That night, Emily didn't leave. She stayed in bed, staring at the wall. I knew she was awake. I could feel the distance between us, even though we were inches apart. I wondered if she knew I was watching, if part of her suspected it, if she was just as afraid as I was. The following night, the camera caught something new. At 2:03 a.m., Emily stood outside, Noah's door longer than usual. She pressed her hand against the wood, her head bowed. For a moment, I thought she might cry. Then she straightened, turned away, and walked downstairs without entering. She didn't leave the house that night. She sat in the living room until nearly 4 in the morning, according to the timestamps, then returned to bed. That footage stayed with me more than any other. Not because it explained anything, but because it complicated everything. Whatever was happening wasn't simple. It wasn't casual. It wasn't careless. It was heavy, and it was tearing her apart too. By the end of that week, I knew one thing for certain. Waiting longer wasn't going to make this easier. Every night I delayed was another night the distance between us grew wider. Another night, Noah slept under a roof full of secrets. I didn't yet know how or when I'd confront her. I only knew that when I did, it couldn't be undone. The answers I was about to uncover would change our family forever, one way or another. And deep down, I had the sinking feeling that the camera had only shown me the surface of something far darker waiting underneath. I didn't confront Emily right away. Not because I was afraid of her reaction, but because I was afraid of my own. I'd spent so many nights building theories in my head that I no longer trusted which emotions were real and which ones were just exhaustion talking. Anger feels righteous until it blinds you. I needed clarity, not an explosion. So I watched. I listened. I waited. Emily became quieter after that week. The kind of quiet that isn't peaceful, but guarded. She spoke only when necessary and avoided eye contact more than usual. When she did look at me, there was something else there now. Not guilt exactly, more like anticipation, as if she knew the ground beneath us was unstable and was bracing for the collapse. No one noticed the tension before either of us acknowledged it. Kids always do. He started lingering near me more, asking questions he already knew the answers to, finding excuses to be in the same room. One night, as I tucked him in, he asked if Mom was mad at him. The question hit me harder than anything I'd seen on that camera. No, I said quickly. Of course not. Why would you think that? He shrugged, staring at the ceiling. She's just different. That was the night I decided I couldn't wait any longer. Emily left the house at 1:52 a.m. again. I watched it happen in real time. This time, though, I didn't stay in bed. I got dressed quietly and waited 10 minutes before following her. Not because I wanted to catch her, but because I needed to see where she went. The camera could only show me so much. I drove without headlights for the first block, then turned them on once I was sure she was far enough ahead. She didn't drive far. That surprised me. She turned into a neighborhood less than 5 minutes away, one older than ours, with narrower streets and houses built closer together. She parked near the end of a cul-de-sac and got out. I parked a block away and walked the rest of the distance, my heart pounding so hard I was sure someone would hear it. I stayed in the shadows, feeling ridiculous and desperate at the same time. Emily walked up to a small blue house and knocked twice. Not rang the bell. Knocked, like she'd done it before. The door opened almost immediately. I couldn't see who let her in. The door closed, and the porch light went off. I stood there for a long time, staring at that house, trying to decide what this meant. An affair would have made sense. It would have hurt, but it would have fit into a narrative I understood. This didn't. Everything about it felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. I went home before she did. When Emily came back, just after 3, she froze when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table. I hadn't turned on many lights. just enough for her to see my face. "You followed me," she said. Not a question. Yes. She closed the door slowly, like any sudden movement might break something fragile between us. She didn't take off her coat. She didn't sit down. "How long have you known?" she asked. That question told me everything I needed to know. There was no denial left. No pretending. "I installed a camera," I said. "Weeks ago." She flinched. Actually flinched. Then she laughed. A short, humorless sound. "Of course you did, Emily," I said, my voice shaking despite my efforts. "You need to tell me what's going on. Now." She stared at the floor for a long moment. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. "Not yet. It's about Noah," she said. My chest tightened instantly. "What about him?" She swallowed hard. "I didn't want to tell you until I was sure." "Sure of what?" "That something was wrong." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. She finally sat down, folding in on herself like the weight of the truth was physically painful. She told me it started months ago. Small things at first. Noah waking up tired. Trouble concentrating. Nightmares he couldn't explain. She said she took him to a child therapist while I was at work, afraid I'd think she was overreacting. The therapist suggested it might be anxiety, or stress, or nothing at all. But then, Emily said quietly, he started saying things in his sleep. I felt cold all over. "What things?" She hesitated again. That hesitation was different now. Heavier. Fear-driven. "He kept talking about a man," she said. "A man who talked to him at night. Who told him secrets." My mind immediately went somewhere dark, somewhere dangerous, and I hated myself for it. "No," I said. "No, that's not." "I know how it sounds," she said quickly. "I know." But I didn't jump to conclusions. I watched him. I listened. I asked questions without leading him. And then I checked the tablet. My stomach dropped. Noah's tablet? She nodded. There were messages. Deleted messages. From an app one didn't recognize. She told me she tracked the account. It led to the house I'd followed her to. The blue house. An older man lived there. A retired school counselor, according to public records. No criminal history. No obvious red flags. "I didn't go to the police," she said, her voice breaking for the first time, "because I didn't know if I was wrong. And if I was wrong, I could destroy an innocent person's life. And ours. So you went alone," I said, anger finally breaking through. "At night, without telling me." "Yes," she said, "because I was scared. And because if I was right, I needed proof before I involved you. Or anyone. The camera. The nightly visits to Noah's room. The hesitation. The secrecy. Suddenly it all made sense in a way that made my blood run cold. "What happened when you went there?" I asked. Her hands are shaking now. The first few times, he denied everything. Said I was confused. Said children imagine things. But the last time, he slipped. She looked up at me, tears finally spilling over. He knew Noah's name before I said it. Silence filled the kitchen. Thick and absolute. Emily continued, her words tumbling out now, desperate. She said the man claimed he was helping Noah with his anxiety. That he'd met him online through a children's game chat. That he never meant harm. That it was misunderstood. And you believed him? I asked. "No," she said. "I recorded him." That was the moment I realized how wrong I'd been about her. About all of it. I'd been so consumed by suspicion and fear that I hadn't considered the possibility that she was fighting a battle I knew nothing about. "I was going to tell you," she said softly. "I swear. I just needed one more visit. One more confirmation." I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady. "We're going to the police," I said. "Tomorrow." She nodded immediately. I know. Neither of us slept that night. The next day, everything moved faster than I expected. Statements. Evidence. Devices confiscated. Officers who spoke gently, but carried the weight of too many similar cases in their eyes. Noah was interviewed by a specialist. He didn't fully understand what was happening. He just knew something bad had been stopped. The man from the blue house was arrested that evening. In the aftermath, our house felt different. Not peaceful, but lighter, like a storm had passed, leaving debris behind, but no longer threatening to tear everything apart. Emily and I didn't magically fix things. Trust doesn't snap back into place just because the truth comes out. We had hard conversations, ugly ones, about secrecy, about fear, about how close we'd come to losing each other by trying to protect the same thing from opposite sides. But we were still standing. And every night now, when I hear Noah breathing down the hall, steady and untroubled, I remind myself of one hard truth I learned too late. Secrets don't protect families. Truth does. The house didn't feel safe just because the man was gone. That illusion faded quickly. Safety isn't something you restore by removing a threat. It's something you rebuild slowly, often painfully, after realizing how fragile it was all along. The first night after the arrest, Noah slept in our room. He didn't ask or explain himself. He just appeared at the doorway with his pillow clutched to his chest, eyes tired but alert, like he was afraid that if he spoke, something might change his mind. Emily opened her arms immediately, and he climbed into bed between us. He curled in her side, his back pressed against my chest. I stayed awake, barely breathing, afraid that any movement might remind him of the fear he was trying to escape. That night rewired something in me. Every sound became a potential threat. The refrigerator humming downstairs felt too loud. The wind brushing against the siding made my heart race. I realized how deeply the last few months had trained my body to expect danger, even when reason told me we were safe. The days that followed were exhausting in a way sleep couldn't fix. There were interviews with specialists trained to talk to children, appointments that required us to recount the same story over and over, each retelling scraping the wound raw again. Emily handled those moments with a steadiness that surprised me. I had thought she would collapse once the secret was out, but instead, she became precise, almost clinical. I understood later that she had already lived through the panic phase alone. What I was experiencing now was months old for her. I struggled more. Anger flared unexpectedly. At myself, at her, at systems that moved too slowly, at the man whose presence had altered our lives so casually. I snapped at a cashier for moving too slowly. I nearly lost my temper with a neighbor who complained about a barking dog. Every emotion felt turned up too high, like a dial stuck past its limit. One afternoon, while Emily and Noah were out, I finally removed the hidden camera. I unplugged it carefully, as if it might accuse me if I was too rough. Holding it in my hand felt strange. It was small, unremarkable, nothing like the weight it had carried in my life. It had given me truth, but it had also introduced a version of myself I didn't recognize. I put it in a drawer and shut it, unsure whether I was putting it away forever or just postponing another difficult decision. Therapy began soon after, together at first, then separately. The counselor didn't allow us to hide behind intentions. She pushed us to say the things we'd avoided. Emily admitted she didn't trust me to react rationally if she told me too early. I admitted that I'd already assumed betrayal before I had evidence. Neither confession felt good. Both were necessary. There were moments when the distance between us felt just as wide as before, only now illuminated instead of hidden. But there were also moments of understanding. Real ones. The kind that don't feel dramatic, but settle quietly into place, changing how you see the person across from you. Noah's recovery was uneven. Some days he laughed easily, losing himself in games or stories, seemingly untouched by what had happened. Other days he withdrew, sensitive to noises, asking questions that carried more weight than his age should allow. We learned not to rush him, not to demand progress as proof that things were getting better. Healing, we were told, doesn't follow a schedule. One night, he asked me why bad people don't always look bad. I didn't have a perfect answer. I told him the truth as gently as I could. That sometimes people hide who they are. That it's okay to trust, but it's also okay to speak up when something feels wrong. He nodded, absorbing it in his own way. Weeks turned into months. Court dates approached slowly, like a storm you could see on the horizon but couldn't avoid. We prepared ourselves for the possibility that this process would take longer than we wanted, that justice would not feel as satisfying as we imagined. Still, knowing that something was being done mattered. Emily and I had our hardest conversation late one night after Noah was asleep. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that invites honesty whether you want it or not. "I was afraid you'd hate me," she said, "for not telling you, for handling it alone." I thought about that, about the nights I'd watched her through a screen instead of asking her directly what was wrong. "I was afraid too," I said, "that if I asked, the answer would destroy us." She reached for my hand. It wasn't dramatic or desperate, just a small, deliberate choice to reconnect. I realized then that fear had driven both of us, but in opposite directions. She hid to protect. I suspected to survive. Stability became our shared goal. We rebuilt routines deliberately. Dinner at the same time, every night. Phones put away. Clear explanations for Noah when he asked questions. Honesty, even when it was uncomfortable. Especially then. Slowly, the nights changed. Emily stopped waking abruptly, stopped pacing the house. Noah began sleeping through the night more often than not. I stopped checking locks repeatedly. The vigilance softened, not disappearing entirely, but loosening its grip. There were setbacks. Nights when Noah woke crying. Days when Emily withdrew into herself. Moments when I caught myself slipping back into suspicion instead of trust. But now we talked about it. We named the fear instead of letting it grow in silence. One evening, Noah asked if the man could ever come back. "No," I said, with more certainty than I felt. "How do you know?" he pressed. "Because we're paying attention now," Emily said. "All of us." That answer mattered. It shifted responsibility from fear to awareness. Sometimes I think about the version of myself who believed a hidden camera was the only way forward. I understand it better now. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't paranoid. He was overwhelmed and alone with his doubt. But I don't want to be him again. I don't want secrecy to be my first instinct. What happened to us didn't make us stronger in a neat, inspirational way. It fractured things. It left marks that won't fully fade. But it also stripped away illusions we didn't realize we depended on. It forced us to choose honesty over comfort, presence over assumption. There are still nights when sleep comes slowly, when the house feels too quiet and my thoughts get loud. But there are also nights when I drift off easily, grounded by the knowledge that we're facing things together now, not alone in our separate fears. I learned that certainty is rare, and control is mostly an illusion. That fear can disguise itself as suspicion if you don't confront it. That silence, even when motivated by love, can be just as dangerous as neglect. And most of all, I learned that protecting your family doesn't mean carrying everything yourself. It means trusting the people you love enough to let them stand beside you when the truth is hard, when it hurts, and when it changes everything. The court date arrived on a gray morning that felt heavier than it should have. Not dramatic or cinematic, just heavy, like the air itself demanded caution. Emily drove while I watched the city slide past the window. Everything looked painfully normal. People walking their dogs, coffee shops opening, traffic lights changing on schedule. The world hadn't paused for us, and that realization made the weight in my chest feel even deeper. Noah stayed home with my sister. We'd agreed he didn't need to see any of it. Whatever justice looked like, it wasn't meant for him to carry firsthand. Inside the courthouse, time fractured into small, forgettable pieces. Security lines, metal detectors, quiet hallways that smelled faintly of disinfectant and paper. People spoke in low voices even when there was no rule requiring it. When we finally sat down, Emily's hand found mine without hesitation. This time it wasn't tentative. It was steady, grounded. The man sat across the room, smaller than I remembered. Older, less significant. Seeing him like that stirred something unexpected in me. Not anger, not satisfaction, just exhaustion. He looked like someone who had already lost, and I realized no verdict would ever balance the scale of what he'd taken from us. The proceedings were methodical. Evidence presented calmly. Statements read without drama. The recording Emily had taken played a crucial role. I watched the judge's face closely, searching for outrage or visible judgment, but what I saw instead was something steadier. Resolution. This wasn't a spectacle. It was a process meant to contain damage, not heal it. When it was over, we stepped outside in a sunlight that felt too bright, too sharp. Emily exhaled, as if she'd been holding her breath for months. Maybe she had. "It's done," she said quietly. I nodded, knowing that wasn't entirely true. Some things don't end cleanly. They just stop actively hurting and leave scars behind. The weeks that followed were oddly quiet. No urgent phone calls. No interviews. No adrenaline. Just the slow return to ordinary life. We focused on Noah. School projects. Soccer practice. Dinner conversations about trivial things. Normalcy felt fragile at first, like glass that might shatter if handled too roughly. Noah still slept with the light on for a while. We didn't argue about it. Healing isn't about forcing milestones. It's about letting them come when they're ready. One night, months later, Noah asked if we could move. Move where? I asked gently. Anywhere else, he said. A different house. Emily and I exchanged a glance. We'd talked about it privately, but hearing it from him changed everything. Do you not like it here? Emily asked. He shrugged. It's okay. I just think I'd sleep better somewhere new. That was all the explanation we needed. We didn't rush the decision, but we didn't delay it either. Within the year, we sold a house. Packing was harder than I expected. Some boxes were easy. Clothes, books, kitchen tools. Others were emotional landmines. Old photos, birthday cards, objects that carried memories we weren't sure how to categorize. On the last night there, I walked through the house alone. The hallway where the camera had once watched silently. Noah's room, now bare except for faint marks on the walls where posters had been. Our bedroom, stripped down to essentials. I didn't feel haunted. I felt finished. The new house was smaller and brighter. It sat closer to a park Noah loved, with big windows and creaky floors that made the space feel alive. The first night there, Noah slept through without waking once. Emily cried quietly in the kitchen when she realized it. Our marriage didn't transform into something perfect. We still argued, still misunderstood each other sometimes. But the arguments were different. They didn't orbit around unspoken fears anymore. We'd learned painfully what silence could cost. Therapy became less about crisis management and more about maintenance. Learning how to communicate before problems hardened. Learning how to ask for help without seeing it as failure. One evening, long after things had settled into something resembling peace, Emily asked me if I regretted installing the camera. I thought about it carefully. Yes, I said. And no. She waited. I regret that we reached a place where it felt necessary. I said. I regret that I didn't trust you enough to ask first. But I don't regret wanting the truth. I don't regret refusing to stay in the dark. She nodded slowly. I regret not trusting you with the truth sooner. That conversation didn't erase the past, but it reshaped it. Years passed quietly. Noah grew taller, more confident. The shadow that once followed him faded into something manageable, then into something distant. Not erased, but integrated. A chapter of his story, not the definition of it. On his 13th birthday, he hugged me longer than usual. "Thanks for keeping me safe," he said casually, like it was an obvious fact. I had to step outside for a moment after that. Emily and I developed small rituals without realizing it. Evening walks, shared coffee on Sunday mornings, checking in with each other instead of assuming. None of it dramatic, all of it essential. There were still nights when I woke suddenly, heart racing for no clear reason. Old instincts don't vanish overnight. But when I reached out now, Emily was there. Present, honest, no secrets vibrating under the surface. I thought often about how close we came to destroying ourselves from opposite sides. How easily suspicion could have turned into accusation. How easily fear could have turned into isolation. If there was one lesson I carried forward, it was this: trust isn't the absence of doubt. It's the willingness to confront doubt together. It's choosing conversation over assumption, presence over distance, truth over comfort. That night years ago, when I installed a hidden camera, I thought I was protecting my family by watching in secret. I was wrong. Protection doesn't come from surveillance. It comes from connection, from listening when something feels off, from believing that the people you love are worth the risk of honest confrontation. Our story didn't end with triumph or revenge. It ended quietly, the way real healing often does, with a family sitting around a dinner table, talking about ordinary things, secure in the knowledge that whatever comes next, we'll face it together.